There's a saying that money is power, and that would mean that trade and the globalization of it really affects the global power play. Now, I'm addressing transnational corporate resource extraction, which is essentially the extraction of raw materials in places like Papua New Guinea by, say, mining, and how that affects the global performance of socioeconomic inequality. Papua New Guinea is very resource-rich and very diverse. It's home to some of the few existing hunter-gatherer groups. Most of the population is rural, and essentially over 800 language groups have been reported to exist in Papua New Guinea. There are a lot of development efforts still going on there, and studies show that most PNG residents wanted development and the concepts of modernity that come with it. This is the reason why mining and resource development was at first welcome as developmental and an exciting opportunity for the country. Mining is going on all over Papua New Guinea, as you can see. And if you'll notice, a lot of the mines have coinciding cities, which have now become mappable proportionally because of the rise of the mines and the economic opportunities that come with it. I will be addressing Oak Teddy, shown in this map in the Western Province near Tabugo. It's the most public example of these mining issues. It's a copper and gold mine, and it's located near a river. It was owned by BHT Billington, which is a large conglomerate foreign company, and is now owned by PNG Sustainable Development Program Limited, which is a result of litigations which were very public in the global community. There are some big effects that went on socially with migrations into those big cities, the unstable industry and reliance on it, and the controversy over involvement in the mine by different ethnic and native groups. There was major ecological destruction, mainly due to discharge and tailings of the mine purposefully disposed into the Oak Teddy River system, which is still causing further ecological effects and has kept indigenous people from continuing their subsistence practices even outside of the direct area of the mine, causing them to not able to grow their own food and raise their own crops and animals. And therefore, responsibility is kind of mixed between a large group of people, with some not even involved in the decision to begin mining. It's also causing health risks. So we have this graph illustrates the global and local phenomenon of this relationship. So the core in this case would be the global north, which exports goods to both the semi-periphery and periphery at a higher price than it is getting for the resources gotten from the periphery and semi-periphery. So in this sense, BHP comes from the core, interacts with the semi-periphery, which would be the landowners of the area where the mine was, and then you have the periphery, which is people affected by the ecological, social, and economic effects of the mine, but we're not necessarily involved in the development of it or directly involved with the mine. So some main things that come out are inequality with export economies, and this affects global power. One of the main reasons why these are foreign companies is that these third world countries don't have the resources to actually invest in their own development projects. So this causes spheres of influence and bargaining tools, which some worth more than others, some monetary and some not, and essentially cause inequality on various issues. Now, primary discourse has really involved the environment, mainly in legal rhetoric, and they're basically addressing the ecological environment. But the fact is, social, economic, and environmental issues have all caused problems throughout the country. It's not just limited to the ecological degradation. However, this ecological degradation is the partial cause and is still continuing and needs to be slowed. Expressive culture shows this, and there's a performance going on by all the actors, which I'll get into in a minute. So the question becomes, whose responsibility are these issues? And how can we further analyze these risks in the future and keep them from happening? Globally, this map represents the poorest 10% of the populations as compared to the rest of the world. Larger countries are better off than the smaller ones. If you'll notice, Papua New Guinea, their poorest 10% of the country, is not doing too great in relation to the rest of the world. Now, when we get into ore exports, or the export of raw materials, Papua New Guinea grows exponentially, along with a lot of other countries which are very resource rich, and yet their poorest 10% of the population is in terrible shape compared to the rest of the world. A lot of people boil this down to the resource curse and dependency theory, which are all related to development, and it's the basic idea that countries that are resource rich fall into exporting raw materials as their primary industry and cannot recover from that due to the instability of the industry, as well as the exponential increase in price when consuming manufactured materials, as the graph earlier represented. So Papua New Guinea is not the only country where this is going on, and more countries in the third world have still recently discovered new natural resources. And does this mean that we shouldn't extract them? How can we? Otherwise, Papua New Guinea is an important example of how this should be handled in the future, and things obviously need to change. These resources found have the potential to give these companies substantial development in the form that they wanted. But even in the US, there have been social crises of industry transformation, such as the Rust Belt, or what's going on in Detroit, which was primarily reliant on the car industry. So the actors here, you have large corporations, and their main focus is making money by extracting these raw materials made for manufacture. The landowners and the stakeholders see this as an opportunity to provide jobs to the community and also to make some money off of this land that they would otherwise just be living off of. Now, the periphery are people who aren't directly involved with the beginnings of these projects, but are affected sometimes detrimentally by the effects. Mostly ecologically. The people downstream from the river are unable to continue their subsistence practices, and social and economic change has arrived because of that, basically causing these communities to really fall into turmoil. There are also external pressures from NGOs and conservation activists, but their goals are not always in line with the indigenous people. And the PNG government is interestingly absent from much of this discourse. Illustrating this, we have an image before mining, and you see a small village, and this is essentially what most of the communities were manifested in. Now, from a conservationist point of view, this is how they see Papua New Guinea. People are not involved in the equation, and they're concerned with all of this that you see in the picture being wiped away. Now, this image is of traditional Papua New Guinean culture, but is that the Papua New Guinean of today? It's certainly what third-party activists and some indigenous groups have tried to present themselves as. But many studies show that it is not in, quote-unquote, anymore to not be a part of this new and modern industrialization, and subsistence practices are often not only unable to be continued, but abandoned by people. As you can see in this picture, Papua New Guineans are listening attentively and wanting the influence of the global north. However, there is already inequality in the simple leadership that the global north is giving rather than local investment and initiative. This is a picture of the Oak Teddy mine close to closing. As you can see, most of the resources have been used up, And that's a main concern for the mine, which is ready to close. But at closing, many people will lose their jobs, and towns surrounding that will also fall with that. Not to mention, the ecological detrimental effects to the environment still remain. And I'm not just talking about the ecological environment. As you can see here, we have a similar picture where the mine is nowhere in sight, but the river is much more brown and polluted. And even the area around this small village, the ground is brown, and it doesn't really seem like there is much ability to live a traditional lifestyle, as was seen in the other picture, where huts were surrounded by greenery and potential growth, natural growth. And this is a picture of what portrays most likely the Papua New Guinean of today, wearing manufactured modern clothes which were imported at a higher price than they are getting from their export-based economy. In addition, it needs to be addressed that there are health concerns beyond subsistence practices, which not only force Papua New Guineans to seek living resources elsewhere, such as food and water, but it also causes health concerns for people living in that area. And this is a third-party, almost activist point of view. You see the motifs of the evil corporation, foreign mining companies, and people are addressed a little bit, but you can see that they're nowhere in this actual picture, and mainly what's addressed is the ecological effects. As you see in this BHP poster, defending themselves in their environmental detriment, however, what about the people that live there and the causes and issues that face them? So basically, Papua New Guinea is full of these mines that are very unstable industries and causing a lot of economic, social, ecological, and generally environmental problems. But it's very reliant on this industry, and even eco-friendly conservationists who start conservation projects fail to address these other social and economic factors, counting on things like ecotourism, which never really seem to pan out. So they're in quite a debacle. And a lot of these countries that have the money to invest in these development projects don't have that local tie, which there's this distance there. So where we get into major global social issues, I mean, ecological environment is an issue in multiple countries. We have deforestation in the rainforest elsewhere. There's a lot of global inequality going on, and this pattern is reoccurring, which is another issue. How can we stop this? And what is development, and how can we reach it? What is development to the indigenous people living there? What is development to those that sold their land to the mine? What is development from the mining companies, who often present their projects that way? And what is development from the stand of these eco-friendly conservationists? Now this brings into the fact how indigenous global representation. A lot of indigenous people represent themselves as either noble savages or worried about the ecological effects, but that's not really the main point here. And so the truth is relative. Basically, PNG is a great example of this issue occurring all over the world, and forward is the only direction because it's almost beyond conservation. Outside social pressure pushes big corporations to take action, but it's not always aligned with the actual goals and needs of indigenous people. In discourse, the environment has come to mean the ecological environment, but that actually encompasses every other aspect of life. Is foreign conservation a global concern? And if development projects were to run with more local investment, would things change in such diverse countries? And these performances can be counterproductive. So what's the next step? How do you preserve PNG? Above, we have the noble savage, but below, we have actual PNG residents mining at Oak Teddy. What is better? The modernity of the modern world, and how can that be reached?